going off script and delivering a special episode. On September 15th, the city of St. Louis has once again been spotlighted for a controversial court decision following the announcement of a not guilty verdict of a St. Louis City police officer. Protesters took to the streets and haven't stopped. Here's Izzy Clark with the story.
Sometimes it takes negative to bring about positive change.
On early Friday, September 15th, St. Louis Circuit Judge Timothy Wilson filed his ruling of not guilty. Protests immediately erupted in downtown St. Louis. Jason Stockley, a former St. Louis police officer, was charged last year with first-degree murder and armed criminal action in the shooting death of Anthony Lamar Smith on December 20th, 2011. His trial was brought to the public alleging Stockley told his partner that he was going to kill Smith while they were pursuing him, then planted a gun on Smith after the shooting. Stockley shot Smith 5 times upon reaching his car. Protests that started with simple numbers of 200 grew to reach the 1,000 mark within hours that Friday. Police action was swift from the St. Louis Police Department, with the state's National Guard on standby as the preventive move from Missouri's 56th governor. What started as a movement of peace led to a night of destruction. The newly elected St. Louis Mayor, Linda Crewson's home was targeted for action by some of the protesters that Friday evening. Police actively shut down the area called the Central West End. The Delmar Loop, an artistic and vibrant community where all ages and cultures convey in St. Louis, was attacked by a small number of rioters, leaving businesses and communities in shock. Will Rivers, a former KRHS media student, was able to capture the Sunday protest held in downtown St. Louis.
My name is Willie Rivers. We started the protests in front of the police headquarters. We were out and we were protesting downtown. We stayed there for about an hour. As you may have read or heard on the news, they had detectives that were in unmarked cars, and they had detectives that were amongst the protesters dressed as protesters and regular civilians. A big part of it has to do with fear and a lack of understanding, a lack of awareness. So I feel that we've brought eyes, a lot more eyes to the situation. I know I'm gonna sound kind of messed up for this, but I feel that it was needed to get a point across. Because of the looting and the rioting and the destruction of property, you're definitely gonna have people that look at that whole movement and organization differently, but you have a lot of people that are going to look at it and be like, okay, this is a call for help, this is a cry for help.
According to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, in total, 121 people were arrested on Sunday, ranging in age from 17 to 64.
We often talk about the cops or the protesters as people who stand on opposite sides of our streets. We stop for a moment and discuss with Rittner High School Student Resource Officer Will Liu about the deep feelings people hold on each side.
Meet Officer Will Liu, patrolman for St. Anne Police Department. He serves as an SRO or School Resource Officer for Rittner High School.
But I've been with St. Anne for 5 years now. I've been a police officer for almost 10 years.
Often you will find Lou's face featured on St. Anne PD Facebook page or community newspaper articles highlighting the outreach programs offered by his department. It is hard not to find his friendly smile on his face.
What is it like being an officer nowadays?
Especially since Ferguson happened and stuff like that. It's definitely a different approach to it.
Did you have something to do with Ferguson?
When the verdict for Mike Brown came out, I spent about 14 days down there, and basically standing on the front lines.
Do you feel safe as a police officer?
Yeah, I feel safe, but there are times when I have been scared at work. When I'm taking rounds coming past my head, I'm definitely not comfortable stuff and breaking stuff.
Do you feel like police officers have too much power?
No, I'm not above the law. No cop is above the law. So if you do something and you get in trouble, then you face the consequences just like everybody else does.
Maybe officers like Lou can establish the relationships with future generations within our community, so we won't have to pick sides anymore. I'm Tristan Talton for KRHS Media.
5 miles from our high school is a St. Louis landmark named The Loop. This is a popular area for our students, filled with music venues, restaurants, and a haven for artists. Was the scene of destruction to businesses during the protest. What effect does this have on owners after they clean up?
I think if you want peace and justice, you have to show peace and love and unity.
Home to local businesses and gathering area for many, the Delmar Loop suffered property damage from rioters during the protest. The day after the protest, people came out to clean and to create artwork that would replace the windows that were destroyed by the rioters the night before. The question is, how were businesses and people affected by the protests?
Our sales are definitely down. I think the protest in the Loop was about 2 weeks ago now, and for most of that time our sales have been down, though they're starting to, this last weekend they got a lot better than they had been previously.
Obviously we have a couple broken windows, so that's unfortunate, but the real focus, I think, of me personally is on the people who are actually losing their lives, like the human cost of police brutality in the United States. So those windows can be replaced, but people can't.
The protests themselves they were positive. They didn't affect anybody in a negative way. It was the handful of people that were, causing destruction that affected things by breaking some windows. And, it kind of overrode the message that the protesters were trying to get out.
Even though the protests took place on the 16th of September, and it has been 2 weeks since then, businesses are still dealing with the aftermath of the protests. However, they are rapidly returning to their normal state of business.
I wish everybody well and to respect the police because they're doing their job, and these gangbangers and hoodlums, drug addicts get their stuff together to where we can all have a safe and happy community.
Protest is defined as a statement or action of disapproval. Its main goal is to cause disruption. Many citizens of St. Louis, both directly or indirectly, have been affected in some form by the protest.
Recent protests have largely occurred in downtown St. Louis. However, the bulk of its citizens reside in St. Louis County. These counties are broken into multiple areas, often bringing in different perspectives. To see how protests affects people throughout the St. Louis region, we talked to students from 2 very different high schools, Lindbergh High School in South County and Pattonville High School in North County. First, we traveled to Lindbergh High School. Lindbergh has been ranked by U.S. News and World Reports as the 8th best high school in Missouri. Like a majority of Missouri high schools, Lindbergh is predominantly white. This is the opinions that some students had to say.
Well, I think it paints a bad picture on all police officers because, most officers that are out there are just trying to do their job, and just like every profession, there's bad people in that profession.
I don't think police discriminate.
Well, it hurts me more here because I have family members who work in the police force down in Ferguson, Florissant, and they almost got out of it, and same thing with North City.
And people vandalize property. This is not a constructive way. You're not a protester. You're not protesting. You're just being a thug. Like, there's this video of these people throwing bricks in a nail salon. Like, what the hell does throwing a brick in a nail salon do? If you feel like something's wrong, like, that's America. Like, First Amendment, you go out there and speak, hold your signs up, and you'll have a voice. But whenever you do this, you're just painting, you're making yourselves look very bad.
Well, they haven't personally affected me, but I live in the county. They're not affecting me. But
I believe you should be able to have not riots or chaos or anything, but more of social meetings where people can sit down from different communities and we'll say, hey, this has happened, XYZ, how can we fix it?
Well, the whole race card where like a cop wakes up in the morning and goes, I'm gonna kill a black person today. No cop does that. There's a huge amount of officers trying to help the community. So, I mean, it does play a role whenever the community thinks the officers are out to get them, when they should try to build a relationship with the police.
What diversity has become is not diversity of race, gender, ethnicity, all of that exists. There's diversity everywhere, but the problem is diversity of mind.
I believe that most communities now are very diverse, but the thing is, again, we need to have people talk and be able to communicate so it's easier for them to understand actual issues.
Now we travel to Pattonville High School, one of the best high schools in the North County area. Pattonville has a wide range of ethnicities, being one of the few schools in Missouri without a major majority. We captured a few opinions on the recent protest.
I mean, they really haven't affected me that much. I mean, I think it's more affecting the people protesting their lives.
You can peacefully protest. It ain't hard. But they want to mess up their own city, which is wrong.
Because people think of certain neighborhoods as ghetto.
Or like the bad neighborhood.
Yeah, some is like nicer. So I think they're being like really split up by that.
I mean, I think we could be more kind to each other, more compliments, more like asking people how their day is and stuff.
The system all messed up, really. The system messed up.
We just need to try harder and not be so judgy.
Ain't nothing else we can really do about it but to keep standing up for our rights and what's wrong.
As the protest enters its second month, we can see that many citizens agree that peaceful protest is the answer for our city. I'm Danny Millette, reporting for KRHS TV News.
We will return to you next week with our normal Rittner headlines. Until that time, check out our website at rittnerlive.org for more updates and stories. And follow us on Twitter and Instagram at KRHS Media. I'm Montrese Bowden for KRHS Media.